All right, what is up, everyone? And we are talking about Snowguard today. And of course, Snowguard is officially out. She's in my token shop as of right now. And I'm going to let you guys know my thoughts on her and whether or not you should get her. So let's get into it. So we have Snowguard. She's the new release. Of course, she is a 1-2, and she spawns either the bear or the hawk. So let's see what those cards do real quick. So we have Snowguard herself. She says, while she is in your hand, she transforms each turn into a hawk or a bear. And from what I remember, it's always hawk first and then bear. We'll have to see if that's the case in practice, right? And then Snowguard Hawk says, on reveal, ignore all location abilities next turn. And then Snowguard Bear says, on reveal, trigger the effect of this location. So one ignores location effects, and the other one triggers the effects. So let's get into each one. Let's talk about the bear first. So Snowguard the bear, like I said, on reveal, triggers the effects of the locations. So there's not a whole lot of locations that can actually make use of this. And I have a few of these on the screen, and not all of these actually work. So let me get into that real quick. So the ones that would work are things like Wakandan Embassy and the Peak. Worth noting that this is a symmetrical thing. It doesn't just trigger the effect of the location for you and you alone, you still get the effect for your opponent as well. So things like Wakandan Embassy, things like the Peak will trigger again and add those two powers to both players' hands, or swap the power and cost for both players' hands. Now, the Peak I think is a bit more interesting because you can kind of get this maybe gotcha moment. Maybe it's a deck that can't really work with stuff like that. Like you're playing someone that's playing like the Hood. But honestly, most of the time, the Peak is good for most players. It's not too often where it doesn't really help them. The only cases might be like against Shuri, for example, hitting the Peak, swapping their Red Skull around, their She-Hulk, things like that. That would be nice and triggering that again, but otherwise, it's not that great. And of course, Wakandan Embassy, that's just a blanket +2 power to everyone. There are going to be times where maybe you have more cards in hand than they do, so you technically get more benefit out of it, but it is a symmetrical thing that helps your opponent. Now, I also included Asgard and Hala not because they're great synergies, it's because they are not good synergies at all. They are the traps that you will fall into. We have confirmation that turn-based effects like Asgard and Hala both saying after turn 4 either destroy all the cards controlled by the enemy or the player losing here for Hala's sake, or Asgard, whoever's winning, draws 2 cards. You cannot on turn 5, for example, play the bear on Asgard or Hala and surprise draw 2 or surprise blow up your opponent's board. It doesn't work that way. Same thing with Murder World and other effects that have turn-based restrictions. Attila is another one. It just doesn't work on those. Nothing will happen because it's past the turn. It's like when you have a Wanda or a Westworld trigger and it transforms the location to something else, and if it transforms into an Asgard or Hala after the turn 4, then nothing happens with those. They just kind of end up being essentially ruins for all that's... They're essentially treated as a ruin at that point. So not very good there. There's not a whole lot of things going on with that's ideal, you know. But let's get into the next one, which is the Hawk. The Hawk says, on reveal, ignore all location abilities next turn. Now, this one has a bit more potential to actually work and be something you want. However, again, this is symmetrical. It just says ignore all location abilities. This is for everyone. The location abilities do not exist for that turn. So the nice thing about this is things like Plunder Castle, Death's Domain, Sanctum Sanctorum, places you typically can't play on comfortably, will be open for play the next turn. However, it will also be open for your opponent. Now, maybe your opponent is playing their game plan with the idea or the expectation that these are closed off, these are not really accessible, so they are going to be putting a lot of their commitment for power into the other locations, and you can maybe, plan ahead for those and have that little information advantage over that, but there's always a chance they can still outpower you there. You always give them a fighting chance. So it's not as bad, but it's still not great giving your opponent the ability to play there as well. If these cards only affected you and you alone, they'd be significantly better, but that's simply not the case. Another one I included here was Quantum Tunnel. I think that one's interesting because there's sometimes late game where you have your big card that you want to play and you want to be able to play on Quantum Tunnel without it actually dipping out. That's always kind of nice. So if you have like a Chavez, something simple like that, or even like a Giganto in the left lane or something, you can play on Quantum Tunnel without worrying that it goes away and you end up pulling out like a Wasp or something really small. But again, same thing happens for your opponent, and that's a really niche example I'm giving. So I included it just for the sake of there's not a whole lot of examples, but it's another one. And then I have a couple of cards here, and just it's not just these two cards. It's any card that has these types of location restrictions. Galactus Crystal, it's kind of nice with those. Let's say your opponent did something where it forces you not be like they Polarised a card into another lane if you're playing Galactus. And the only other lane open is the one that says, no, the on-reveal abilities don't happen here. Well, that sucks for Galactus, right? So now you could play Snowguard technically on another lane, disable that location, and then still be able to Galactus. It kind of works. It's not very good. I don't think this is going to be a staple in Galactus decks. I really don't. I just think it's not very good at all. And of course, we have Crystal, same idea. In any card that has that middle location restriction, like Crystal, Medusa, things like that, if you have a card, or if you have a location in the middle, like Plunder Castle, Death's Domain, Sanctum Sanctorum, that you can't get the benefit of playing on that middle location, then you can disable it, play on it, get your stuff out of it. But again, it's that situation, is the juice worth the squeeze? And I don't think it is. It's really not. It's really unfortunate, to be honest, and I just don't think it's very good, in all honesty. But those are some synergies for both those. Let's keep going. The big elephant in the room, of course, is this card costs 6,000 tokens. It's dropped into Series 5. That's it. 6,000 tokens is what you pay, and you get a card that seems pretty weak on first glance. And even when you start digging a bit deeper, the synergies that exist, yeah, there are synergies, but they're not very strong, and they're very niche in the way that they would work, because you're essentially functioning with a card that relies on the RNG of the game to be able to either counteract it in the ways of the unplayable locations or re-trigger things. But again, you can't even do the cool things like Hala or Asgard. And again, 6,000 tokens. It's a huge ask. And what else can you get with 6,000 tokens? You always have to remember that. If you're looking at the cost of this card, well, what else is out there for 6,000 tokens? You got the big bads. You got Galactus. You got Thanos. You got Kang. You have High Evolutionary on the horizon coming soon. It's going to be 6,000 tokens. It might even be a big bad joining the big three that we see above him, and having another card that's always going to be 6,000. That's going to be well worth your money. Kitty Pryde is a phenomenal card whenever she comes back to the game. Whenever she's re-released, then yeah, Kitty Pryde is another 6,000 token one that I think definitely makes an archetype around it. And that's the thing. Look at these cards. All of these cards, with the exclusion of Kang and Jeff, but Jeff is a very cool card, and it's a much more unique tech card that can kind of slot into any deck and actually can maybe make Cerebro 3 stronger. But going back to the other four, out of 4 of these 6 cards of these examples, Galactus, Thanos, High Evolutionary, and Kitty Pryde have archetypes that can be created because of them. Kitty Pryde makes bounce decks indefinitely stronger, especially with the new release of Hitmonkey. That's amazing, and that's going to be a deck that you can climb to infinite. We've already seen so many people this season hit infinite with Hitmonkey as is right now in those kind of shells, and there's no Kitty Pryde. So just think about the potential of that deck moving forward when she gets re-released. Then, of course, you have Galactus. There is no other deck like Galactus. He is the deck. That's a whole new archetype opened up for you. There's Thanos. And there's so many different things you can do with Thanos. He's an extremely, extremely flexible card thanks to the stones. And it's just an amazing card all around. And again, a 6,000 token big bad. He's worth it in that sense. And of course, High Evolutionary is like another alternative to a Patriot deck. Instead of using Patriot to buff up your cards with no abilities, now you give them abilities. And that opens up so many things because it's not just non-ability cards gaining abilities. They're separate types of abilities. There's floating energy every turn kind of cards, like the Hulk, and I think Cyclops is another one where you benefit from floating energy. So you can play like Sunspot, She-Hulk, maybe an Infinite type of shell. Then there's another aspect of those cards where it's afflicting negative power to your opponent. So you could do like a Luke Cage, Hazmat, Wong type of deck. You don't have to put all of these in the same deck. So basically, High Evolutionary gives you the options of essentially 2 different decks right off the bat because there's different types of archetypes within the new archetype he's creating. 6,000 tokens. Or you can get this. I mean, come on. Like, if this was a Series 3 card, it'd be super cool to try out, see how it is. 1,000 tokens is nothing. And again, you can't even use 1,000 tokens anymore on Series 3 cards because they got rid of that in the token shop, which is a whole other thing. You can't go wrong with getting these over that. What else can you get with your tokens? Well, we have some cards that are here. Darkhawk, one of the best cards in the game, opens up a new archetype, whether it's a Darkhawk shell on its own. Maybe you got Master Mold, which, again, isn't really a card I recommend buying for the 6,000 tokens, but I did. It's a fun card. I like Ronin as well, so a Darkhawk Ronin shell is really cool. That's a whole new archetype that you have, or you can just slot Darkhawk into a Devil Dino deck. Very nice. There's Null, which pairs amazing with your Galactus here and is one of the best cards in the game with Galactus. And of course, you can still play around with Null in destroy decks. I've tried a variation of Death Wave with Null at the top end as opposed to Arrow, and I think that's really cool as well. And then you can do like maybe like Deadpool things with it and stuff like that. It's a very cool card. And of course, Stature, she is 6,000 tokens right now, but she's set to drop to Series 4 this month. 3,000 tokens for Stature. That's a really cool card. You can do cool things with She-Hulk, Moon Girl, Black Bolt. It's a much cooler deck in archetype. It's something that you can build around. Or she can just slot into a normal discard deck. You have the flexibility. And these are not even comparable to these. It is so far and above worth it in terms of token cost to get these cards or these cards as opposed to the Snowguard. It's just that. So Snowguard, do not buy her. She is not good. The reasons are she's extremely niche. The interactions are very kind of few and far between, and even the ones that you think would be cool don't even work like you want them to in the first place. The effects are symmetrical. You give shit to your opponent, you activate their stuff for them, and it gives them much more of a fighting chance to stay in the game with you. And even then, the ones you're activating might not be that great anyway, or deactivating. It's just the symmetry is not good for this card. Existing synergies have better support cards already, so she works with other cards, and do they really make those decks better, like Galactus, or cards like Kitty Pryde or like Medusa and stuff like that? No. You're not really trying to play it with her. Galactus doesn't need this card. Honestly, like Ghost would be a better option for a Galactus deck than Snowguard would be. So it's really awkward. And then, of course, she doesn't spawn new decks or archetypes. You're not making a new deck all around Snowguard to trigger locations or ignore locations. There's just that's not really a card type in the game, or not really an existing archetype that can slot in, or there's no really support cards around her to lift her up to make a new deck that can even be competitive, let alone functional. And of course, 6,000 tokens is too much. It's just not worth it. But that is my opinion. What do you guys think? Tell me what you think about her. Do you think she's worth it? Do you think she should, you should get her? I don't think so. Are you planning on getting her? I'm definitely not. Let me know down below. Remember to like and subscribe, help grow the channel, all that good stuff. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you for the next one.
Tear me open, come undone. Leave me empty just for fun. Show no mercy, sever ties. Leave me only shadows. We try.